This week on Disaffected, if you've ever been suspended on social media, you've been caught in a Kafka trap. We'll talk about how Twitter's hate speech and suspension policies are just codified narcissistic abuse that they call terms of service. Then we're going to talk about gaslighting. It's not a catch-all term for something you don't like. It's a deliberate attempt to make you feel like you're losing your mind. Grab your notebook, because we're going to diagram it like a sentence. Finally, we're going to have some fun with a cartoon guide for trans women that shows them how to put on the wounded bird camouflage so that they can have consequence-free public tantrums. All this and more this week on Disaffected. Welcome to Disaffected. I'm Joshua Slocum. This is the show where we talk about a public political discourse that has been infected and shaped by what most people usually think of as personal dynamics, and particularly abuse dynamics, the kinds of psychological manipulations, methods of deception, and character distortion that are often used by people with cluster B personality disorders. And cluster B personality disorders generally, even if you haven't heard of that before, this is the kind of character that people have who are domestic abusers, abusive husbands, abusive wives, abusive backstabbing bosses. And it's also the character of many people who abuse their children. And if you want to get a little bit of a foundation in that, I suggest checking out episodes 1 and 2 of this show. Those tell the origin story of this show, a little bit about my personal history and how I made the connection between the domestic and child abuse that is rife in my family and those same dynamics occurring now in our public political discourse, and most acutely on the left, and particularly the social justice left, or what I call the woke left. So I want to do a little housekeeping first, as usual, and it'll make me feel better to say this. See these? When I do this, this is not an affectation like you see in made-for-television movies where they take off their glasses for the dramatic thing. This is actually so I can see. These are extraordinarily cheap reading glasses. I need them to read, but if I put them on my face, I can't see. Well, I can't see you at all, but I can't see the camera, which is supposed to be you. So there, now that I've gotten that out of the way, I'm not doing this for dramatic effect, nor am I hitting the microphone for dramatic effect. That's just because I'm clumsy. So thank you to those of you who subscribe to us on Patreon. We are still sorting ourselves out. This is still the beginning of this show, and your support really, really matters. And I think I have caught up with thanking all of you personally by email, but if I haven't gotten to you yet, I will get into the email. We do know you're out there, and we really appreciate it. This show right now is a labor of love for me and for my producer, Kevin. We're putting our own time and our own capital into this. We both have day jobs. So, we are still in the startup phase, and the fact that some of you like what we do enough to actually financially support it means an awful lot. And if you do like this show and you would like to see it succeed, we could use your help. Go to patreon.com/disaffected. That's DISAFFECTED. Patreon.com/disaffected. And yes, I have seen the suggestions from some of you about alternative donation platforms such as Subscribestar. Thank you, very well spotted. We are aware that Patreon can be a little bit like other media platforms and boot you off if you're not woke enough. So we are aware that that may be an issue, and we are looking into others. But thank you for that. I really appreciate these tips that you guys are starting to send in to us. And I also wanted to give a really, really warm welcome to our hate watchers. Hi, hate watchers. I'm so glad to see you. I feel like, what is this, episode 11 now? So we've got hate watchers for the first time. I don't care why you watch this show. I don't care if you watch it because you find it scintillating, you find it funny, or you are just looking for things to mind because you dislike me personally or you don't like what we talk about on the show, the more conversation, the better. And the fact that those of you who are hate watching are kind of leaving a breadcrumb trail so that other people can find us only means for us. So thanks, folks. Come back after this. Thanks so much for listening. Would you take just a minute right now and share our show on social media? On Disaffected, we take a close look every week at the abuse dynamics exploding in the dark and disordered world that we live in. Tell other people about us. And when you subscribe, hit that notification bell and stay with us in real time as we take a new close look every week and examine how to identify and contend with the abuse dynamics at play in the world around us. Welcome back. We've been living in a social media world for how many years now? When did Twitter start? Twitter and Facebook, somewhere around 2005, 2006, 2007. But social media has become a part of our daily lives, for good and for ill. It's intensely addictive. I've certainly found that to be the case. And it pushes us into artificial interactions and can make us sort ourselves into these tribal groups that we probably wouldn't sort ourselves into if we were actually interacting with each other face to face. On the plus side, you can meet a lot of people in many different parts of the world that you wouldn't have been able to speak to without this technology. And I know that some of you watching here are from outside the country too, and I talk to some of you on Twitter and Facebook, and we wouldn't have that without social media. So interest groups coalesce around each other, but tribal warfare is also encouraged by the social media platforms. And one thing that I've noticed recently, I had a personal Twitter account years ago, and it's been, has to be at least 3 years, maybe 4, that I got rid of that account, and I was finding Twitter too toxic. And I came back on it, of course, because I want to promote the show. And it's only gotten worse. And it struck me this week, I've been suspended 3 times this week on Twitter for, they claim, violating their rules against hateful conduct. Of course, I did no such thing. Yes, I'm a loudmouth. I'm very blunt. I say things that make people squirm and they get very uncomfortable because I don't sugarcoat them. I am not, however, a bully. I'm not someone who harasses other people. I don't libel other people. I don't promote violence against other people. But I'm certainly not the only one who's been caught up in Twitter's dragnet. And I want to show you some of these examples of what got me suspended and show you how Twitter's very terms of service are a codified form of cluster B narcissistic abuse. So the first one we're going to look at here is my first suspension from this past week. And many of you are just listening. You're not able to see what I have on the screen here, so I'm going to read this for you. Twitter notified me, we've temporarily limited some of your account features. What happened? We've determined that this account violated the Twitter rules, specifically for violating our rules against hateful conduct. You may not promote violence against, threaten, or harass other people on the basis of race, ethnicity, national origin, sexual orientation, gender identity, religious affiliation, age, disability, or serious disease. You can't get through that with one breath. So what did I do that was hateful conduct? I said this. This was me responding to a thread by someone else. And the context for this was a conversation about some of the abusive behaviors that trans activists, particularly those who are prominent on social media, engage in while pretending to be victims. So I said, there are thousands and thousands doing this, validating, quote, trans identity, which looks a lot more to me like validating borderline personality disorder or trauma maladaptive traits. And the doctors, good God, this is worse than the satanic panic of the 1980s. So a couple of things here. This is me not taking off my glasses for dramatic effect. Let's go back to what Twitter says its rules are. You may not promote violence against, threaten, or harass other people. Nothing that I wrote here promoted violence. Nothing in here was harassing anybody. Nothing in here was threatening anybody. What I said was that people who are, quote, validating trans identities, pushing them, excusing any misbehavior, any troubling or sinister behavior by someone who claims a trans identity, in trying to validate this identity, I think that the apologists are actually validating what looks to me like a borderline personality disorder traits or trauma responses. And a quick reminder, borderline personality disorder is one of the 4 cluster B personality disorders. Borderline, narcissistic, histrionic, sociopath. These are the erratic and dramatic personality disorders, and borderline personality disorder is known primarily for how unstable people with it are, emotionally unstable, flying off the handle at small provocations, very insecure, often not a stable sense of identity in themselves. They're not sure who they are, so they tend to flip from one identity to another. They might be a vegan activist one week, and then the next year it's all Black Lives Matter, then it's trans, it's this, that, or the other thing. And my reference here to the satanic panic, for those of you who don't know what that is, this would be a good thing for you to look up. Some of you are too young to remember this, and some of you are outside the U.S. During the 1980s and through the mid-1990s, a craze took over the United States. It's a craze that was called the satanic panic. A number of mostly women, young women, but actually older women, and this was really spurred on by some extraordinarily misguided and outright unethical therapists, psychotherapists. And the idea was that that these women who were experiencing trouble in their lives that they needed therapy for had repressed memories of sexual abuse, and often it was claimed violent, incestuous sexual abuse. And the idea of repressed memories was at the core. This was the idea that some kinds of abuse inflicted on a child, particularly incestuous sexual abuse, were so traumatic to the child that she repressed it from her memory. It wasn't that she didn't think about it. It wasn't that she stuffed it down and denied it and tried to ignore it. It's that she literally made it inaccessible. She had no recall and no recollection of this until helped by a therapist to bring it out. The concept of repressed memories has been thoroughly discredited. There's been a lot of scientific research. Take a look at the work done by Dr. Elizabeth Loftus, who is hated among the people who still believe in repressed memories. But I find her work convincing. And it appears that, and here's the problem, incestuous sexual abuse does occur, and more of it occurs than ever gets reported or remediated. That is true. But it does not appear to be true that people forget these things. They suddenly forget. I mean, some of the claims were not just that a father and sometimes a mother was sexually abusing the child, but the adult looking back would make really florid claims. Some of them claimed to have been vaginally raped with knives. Yes, I'm serious. They claimed that when they were in daycare, a number of daycares and daycare workers were caught up in this. Some of them were tried, convicted, and sent to prison. Absolute travesty of justice. The claims were that this was part of an organized ring of pedophiles that were part of a satanic cabal. They were literal devil worshippers who engaged in rituals like infant sacrifice or, aborting late-term fetuses and literally eating the baby on an altar in a satanic ritual and forcing the little girl children to participate in this. I mean, just extraordinary. Things like Well, the reason why nobody saw them take us away to the woods is they've built secret tunnels underneath the daycare. So there's a tunnel that connects the daycare center to the woods. Other children claimed that during the 8-hour period where they were left in daycare, that their alleged abusers literally put them on airplanes and flew up in the sky to abuse them and then landed and came back. I shouldn't have to say that it's highly unlikely that any of this ever happened. But when you've got to understand what people can fall for. Even the women who claimed that they had been vaginally raped with sharp objects like knives and razors still claimed this, even though on physical examination there was absolutely no evidence of that kind of trauma. So the satanic panic really took over the United States. And it was on every talk show. It was on, I'm sure I remember some of this happening on Oprah Winfrey. It was on a then popular talk show hosted by Sally Jesse Raphael. A number of best-selling books were written, and one of them was basically a manual of how to create false memories called The Courage to Heal, which has done an incredible amount of damage and convincing women who were genuinely traumatized, experienced some kind of child abuse, very, very likely, but certainly were not caught up in a satanic pedophile ring or smuggled away to satanic altars through tunnels underneath daycares. So I bring this up because it's the closest analog that I can bring to mind of our craze right now for so-called transgenderism, the idea that you are born in the wrong body, that you have an internal essence that's either male or female that conflicts with your actual sexed body. This looks to me like a Baroque elaboration of the same kind of twisted psychological dynamics that were going on there. So I get suspended for this for 12 hours. Let me show you the next one. I'm going to show you 3 of these, and then I'm going to tie it together and show you how Twitter is functioning in a situation of information asymmetry. It's kind of a Kafka trap. So I came back after my 12 hours, and the next day, as soon as I started tweeting again, all of a sudden my screen locked up, and I saw this. Again, you have violated our rules against hateful conduct. You may not promote violence against, threaten, or harass, ... just like last time. So what did I say this time? It's part of the same conversation. I said to someone else, there's little point in trying to get through to such trans people, in my view. They're not misguided. Most of them are personality disordered or so severely traumatized as to be close to it. Clinical narcissism / borderline. There's no rational thought going on here. Next one. This does not mean that those who believe that they are trans are, quote, bad people. Some certainly are. It means they have a personality disorder or something in that neighborhood, and they are often aggressively abusive to others. Again, this isn't flattering. It does not paint so-called trans people in a pretty light. I don't intend to paint them in a pretty light. And I'm not even talking about all trans people. I made sure to say there's little point in trying to get through to such trans people. The context here was the abusive ones who are constantly claiming they're victims while bullying other people. The kind of people, basically, who stalk my Twitter feed and stock up on tweets so that they can get me suspended each time I come back. Nothing hateful, nothing threatening, and nothing harassing. This is part and parcel of that don't stigmatize mental illness claim that we hear all the time. Social justice people, woke people on the left are constantly going on about stigmatizing mental health. Don't stigmatize mental health. You know what I find really interesting? When I suggest, and not just me, when anyone actually suggests that there is a mental illness or a mental pathology at play in somebody who has an unstable sense of identity and believes that they were a man born in a woman's body or vice versa, these people treat that like you're accusing them of having a mental illness. Now, if you're really concerned about stigmatizing mental illness, why are you reacting as if noticing mental illness is itself an insult? And there's no way to get through to them about this. I've tried. Over the years, I have been diagnosed with obsessive-compulsive disorder, panic disorder with Tourette's features, major depression, and finally with complex post-traumatic stress disorder, which I think, although it's not listed in the DSM, is probably close to the mark. I look back on the mental problems that I've had over my life as a result of the child abuse that I endured, and I don't really see those problems that I had as separate syndromes all on their own. I think that they are symptoms, and sometimes very elaborate symptoms, of complex or complicated post-traumatic stress disorder. I don't see any shame in having mental illness. I never have. I couldn't, because it's been a part of my life for a long time. And although I'm a different person than I was when I was a teenager, I pretty much have always been an open book about the state of my mind as I am with you on this show. I don't hide it, because I do think that stigmatizing mental illness is a problem. But these people treat it as an insult when you suggest that the people they believe they're trying to help and saying, yes, you are trans, you really are a woman, you really are, that isn't really their problem. Their problem is that they have an untreated personality disorder, which is usually the result of trauma, or they have untreated PTSD, or in the case of young girls, there's been an explosion of teenage girls and sometimes even tweens wanting to go on puberty blockers, saying that they're trans. You almost can't find a young lesbian anymore because they're all claiming that they're boys. I don't know if anybody has hard statistics, but there's enough evidence out there that a good sizable chunk of these young women are actually autistic. It's not necessarily that they have borderline personality disorder, although those two things can co-occur. But it seems to be that the rigid style of thinking, the black and white, sort into categories, everything has to be in its own. I mean, you can see some autistic people who have sensory problems, or they have very rigid ways of categorizing things. It can even express itself in things like being extraordinarily upset if foods of a different texture are on the same plate and are not separated out by each other. I'm not trying to make fun of anybody here. I'm explaining this. You can easily see why somebody whose mode of thinking is very binary or very categorical, who comes along and says, well, I'm a 13-year-old girl, I'm growing breasts, I'm starting to have my period, but I don't like any of the things that girls are supposed to like. I don't like playing with Barbies. I don't like having the kinds of sleepovers that other girls do. I'm a tomboy, or I like rough and tumble. I like cars and trucks and engines rather than dolls. You can easily see why a person who thinks in a very rigid way would say, that must mean that I'm actually a boy, because it makes sense within its own internal system. They're being failed, these young people. They're being failed, and they're being hurt by people who are supposed to help them. And the people with borderline personality disorder, although I don't let people with borderline personality disorder near me most of the time, because people with untreated cluster B disorders who are not aware of it and don't take responsibility for it are not only highly unpleasant and difficult to deal with, they are often dangerous. But they are suffering too, and especially young people. Personality disorders don't suddenly come on at 18 years old, right? That's an arbitrary cutoff for some diagnostic purposes. But you can see incipient borderline or narcissistic personality disorder or incipient histrionic personality disorder in the teen years. It's not like they go along stable and fine and then boom, on their 18th birthday when they're a legal adult, suddenly a personality disorder just pops into place. It doesn't work like that. They're suffering too. And the real tragedy of this, I should say the real tragedy, what about this is not a tragedy? If you get them young, if you get these young people who are growing into a personality disorder early, and you can get them into specific and directed trauma therapies that are cognizant of how cluster B disorders form, you have a much, much better chance of getting them out of a personality disorder or being able to tame it significantly. And not only are they not getting this help, they are being validated by doctors, the American Medical Association, the American Psychological Association. All of them are trans-affirming. Go back to the Satanic Panic. This is akin to the huge number of therapists who did a lot of damage in the 1980s by helping create these so-called repressed false memories, validating them and saying, yes, this is your path to healing. You have to recognize that your mother and father were in a satanic cult and raped you with a knife. They're doing the same thing with these so-called trans kids. I'm not abusing them, I'm not threatening them, and I'm not harassing them to point out that they are suffering from a serious psychopathology that needs help, and it needs help now. So, once again, I went through the process of trying to appeal the tweets, and I ended up just deleting them, and I'll get to that at the end of this. You'll see how wicked this system is. I got struck again with a 12-hour suspension on the third day, again accusing me of violence, threatening or harassing people. My tweet was this: as long as we continually refuse to acknowledge the underlying problem with trans people like this, borderline and cluster B personality disorders, we're going to continue to bullshit. I realize that a lot of people don't like the way I talk about this. They want me to be softer. They want me to speak in euphemisms. They want me to walk around the topic. I'm not going to do it. I will not do it. I may be more plain-spoken and more blunt than many people, and I think that's true. It's a double-edged sword. It's gotten me in trouble. I've let my mouth run away with me many, many times during my life, and I will again. But there's a positive side to it, too. Somebody needs to speak frankly, and far too few people do it. You should see my inbox on any of my social media or my email account. You should see how many people say, you are saying exactly what I've been thinking, but I know that if I say this, my mother will never speak to me again. I know that if I say this, I'm going to lose my job as a guidance counselor at the public school. Our society needs diplomats, but it also needs firebrands. I'm not being abusive by talking about this directly, and I wouldn't have to talk about this as directly as I do if there were more people who were telling the truth. Now let's look at Twitter's actual policy here and how it works. So, when you are accused of breaking Twitter rules, they give you two options. You can either delete the tweets, which is what they want you to do, or you can appeal them. But there are different pathways to getting there. So if you delete the tweets, part of what you're doing is you are admitting guilt. You are admitting that you broke the rules. If I delete these tweets, I am saying to Twitter, I recognize that I harassed, I recognize that I promoted violence, and I recognize that I denigrated people on the basis of their membership in a protected class. And I resent that. It's obnoxious. I have done no such thing. That's the easy way. But they also give you an option to appeal. But what happens when you appeal? Oh, well, first of all, if you delete the tweets, you should understand this. When they give you a timed suspension, like I got 3 12-hour suspensions this week, the clock doesn't start ticking until you take action. So if you haven't logged into your Twitter account all day or for several days and then you come back to it, they haven't started the clock on you because they want you to experience the deprivation and frustration. They want you to experience this as a punishment. So they will not start the clock until you interact with them so that you understand that you are being silenced. If you delete the tweets, you can read Twitter. You can read your direct messages, your private messages that are not tweets. You can't like, you can't retweet, you can't actually tweet, but you can read tweets. And you have access to your account. You can send direct messages, private messages to your friends and followers. And you can also, and this is key here, you can also change the settings on your account. So a lot of times when people like me are being targeted the way I've been targeted this week, you'll want to go in and do what's called protect your tweets. And that means that if you go in and check that box, only the people who are on your followers list, the people, who follow you, and that you've allowed to follow you, only they can see your tweets. When you protect the tweets, they're not visible to the wider public. So it's not like it's gone completely private. I mean, I've got about 600 followers, and, who knows how many of them are actually hate followers, but you can at least do some damage control. So what I'd like to do is to protect my account so that while I'm suspended and I'm unable to respond, that people searching for tweets like my Twitter stalker's been doing, they can't do that, right? If it's one of my followers, they can certainly do it, but I don't think this was one of my followers. I think somebody saw me participating in another conversation and started to bank some of my tweets. So if you delete them, you have access to your account, but not if you appeal. If you appeal, not only does Twitter not tell you how long you'll be suspended, they don't say, we will get back to you within the 12-hour time frame. They just say, thanks for your appeal. Just so you know, when you appeal, you may not access your account. And I made this mistake the first time, which meant, and I didn't realize this, but as soon as I submitted the appeal, I can't see my account. I can't go into my settings and protect my tweets. I have to sit there with the knowledge that somebody is actually cataloging my tweets and probably building a case to get me suspended again. Twitter does this deliberately. Do you know what this is called? This is called narcissistic abuse. This is codified narcissistic abuse in the terms, the Twitter terms of service. It's information asymmetry. They know what they want to do, but you don't know. They give themselves no time limits. None of my appeals did I ever get a response to. I ended up going back and eventually deleting the tweets because nobody responded to me actually within 24 hours when I appealed. They do this deliberately. They don't tell you they'll get back to you, and they will not get back to you because they want you to delete the tweets and they want you to admit your guilt and say that you harassed. This is literally like a Franz Kafka story. And this is one of my major problems with the power that social media has, because the power is asymmetrical. They sit behind algorithms, or they claim that human decisions are not responsible for who they flag and who they call a bully. But they are the ones who built these algorithms. So that's that about Twitter. There will be more social media to dissect after this break, so come back. Hey listeners, guess what? We're on Patreon now. Bringing you this show costs money. Would you chip in to help? Go to patreon.com/disaffected. That's patreon.com/DISAFFECTED. Thank you. Welcome back. This would be a good time, if you don't have it, this would be a good time to get a notebook and something to take notes with. I should remember to say that at the top of the show every time, because I'm not always able to do it as directly on point as I want to. But what I hope to do in most episodes of this show is actually show you real life examples of cluster B style abuse, narcissistic abuse, psychological misdirection and bullying tactics. I like to lay them out and narrate them for you so that you can see step by step what people are doing and how they do it. We're going to talk about gaslighting. I know that that is a term that's overused. There are a lot of terms that have become overused. I was just looking at a story in the New Yorker before we started the show today that's all about this, the creeping therapization, if you will, of our language. Everyone's talking about trauma and holding space and being triggered and all of these things that actually have their genesis, most of them, in legitimate approaches to mental health issues have become popularized, or Oprah Winfreyized, as I like to say. Gaslighting is one of them. And the frustrating thing about this, it's not just that, people misuse these terms. They do misuse them. And a lot of well-educated, down-to-earth mental health professionals are very disturbed at that. But I'm disturbed for another reason, and that is that the popularization of these terms dilutes them until people no longer know what they actually mean. And then we no longer have access to them because if we use those terms in the proper way to describe a real psychological phenomenon, we are dismissed by people who say, that's just what these crazies say. That's just what whiners and crybabies say. Everyone says they're triggered. Everyone says they need a safe space. So we can't talk about this stuff anymore. And I realize I'm tilting at windmills, right? But I'm going to try to claw some of these good terms back. And gaslighting is the one I want to talk to you about right now. Gaslighting is not a synonym for he said something I dislike. It is not a synonym for he said something mean. It's not a synonym for she disagrees with me and she's wrong, therefore she's gaslighting me. It's none of those things. It's a very specific tactic. It comes from a classic Hollywood movie called Gaslight, and I believe that it was a play before it was a Hitchcock movie. There may even have been more than one movie. But the story, Gaslight, is the story of a married couple with a husband who, they didn't have the term then, but is very obviously a cluster B narcissistic abuser. A husband who tries to make his wife believe that she is crazy. He starts subtly altering the reality in their home environment and then claiming that nothing is going wrong and that she's imagining things. And he does this with the gaslights. And for those of you who don't know, it was before the late 19th century, natural gas, the stuff that flows out into the air, was piped into homes. You know, the way that we have gas stoves now, people used to have gas lights. So the lines would actually go up through the walls and there'd be fixtures. They'd come down through the ceilings and you'd light a flame, or you'd light a flame and it would have a glowing mantle on top of it, like you've seen in a Coleman lantern, right? That mesh that's got rare earth minerals and it glows when it's heated. So gaslighting was extremely popular in homes before electricity because it was reliable. It's infinitely dimmable. That's the key point here. You can turn it up really high or you can turn it down really low. So in Gaslight, the play in the movie, the husband would go into another room or go up into the attic and turn down the gas, or he'd open up lights in other rooms on other floors of the house, which would make the gas pressure drop so that the lights downstairs where his wife was sitting would dim ever so slightly, and then a little bit more and a little bit more. And she'd say to her husband, "What's wrong with the lights?" And he'd say, "What do you mean?" And she'd say, "Why are the lights dim?" "They're not dim." "Yes, they are. It used to." No, you're imagining things. There's nothing wrong with the lights. Look. Just fine. That's where the term gaslighting comes from. Gaslighting means deliberately destabilizing another person's sense of reality and pretending that you have no idea what's going on. And the purpose of it is to disorient your victim, to make her believe that she's imagining things, to make her believe that she might actually be hallucinating or losing her mind. Narcissistic abusers gaslight. Other people gaslight too. I mean, it's not only that people with cluster B personality disorders do this. That's the thing about personality disorders that I need to remember to repeat to everybody. The traits that you see in cluster B personality disorders are not exclusive to those with the disorder. They are human traits. They're bad behaviors that all humans can engage in, and that most of us engage in 1, 2, or 3 of them at some time in our lives. Splitting the idea that somebody is all good or all bad, projection, letting the things that are actually wrong with you that are eating you up, projecting them onto other people and accusing them of having the problem that's actually yours to solve. These are they happen very frequently in people with personality disorders, but it's not that only people with personality disorders do that. But gaslighting is a favorite of cluster Bs. And I am not saying that the person I'm about to discuss is personality disordered. I'm not speculating that way, but I am saying that he's gaslighting. So this tweet It's part of a conversation that I jumped into on Twitter with a well-known Canadian psychologist, Dr. James Cantor. He's a very interesting guy. He's very sharp. He's very witty. I enjoy reading his Twitter, which is the reason I follow him. But I have some pretty extraordinary disagreement with him on the concept of so-called trans children. And I was a little bit surprised to see how that played out. So the first tweet here, and I'll read that for those of you who are listening. Dr. James Cantor says, and he was talking about the problem with legislation, lawmakers writing laws that limit or proscribe or prescribe the kinds of therapies that mental health experts are legally allowed to do, the kinds of treatments they're allowed to do and those that they aren't allowed to do. He's right that this is a very sticky wicket. As soon as you get the law involved in these things, the law can do things to prevent abuse, but it can also completely misunderstand the psychotherapeutic process and tie a clinician's hands behind her back in ways that the law should not be doing. So it's very much a double-edged sword. It's very mixed. So that's what he's talking about. And he says, laws telling mental health experts what to do are all unlike before. And I think that he means that some of these laws that are coming up now are unlike laws that came up before. He says, we can't refer to, quote, kids as if they all need the same thing. They don't. For some, transition is the right thing. And some want transition for unhealthy reasons. One size fits all is the real problem. And he was actually responding to a prominent lawyer at the American Civil Liberties Union called Chase Strangio, a female-to-male so-called transgender person. Her real name is Kate. Chase Strangio is frightening. She is constantly on Twitter affirming so-called trans kids, fighting for their right to have their breasts cut off, fighting for their right to be put on puberty blockers, and accusing other people of mistreating and abusing so-called trans kids by denying them this so-called life-saving affirmative treatment. She is dangerous. She is dangerous, and she appears to have set the entire agenda at the American Civil Liberties Union. So Dr. James Cantor was responding to her with, in some sense, a more nuanced take. But listen to what he said. We can't refer to kids as if they all need the same thing. For some, transition is the right thing, and some want transition for unhealthy reasons. This was my response on Twitter. There is no such thing as a trans kid. There is no such thing as a kid who needs transition. That's shocking, James. And I mean what I said. There is no such thing as a child who was born in the wrong body. The fact that I'm sitting here taping this show right now, and as I'm talking to you, I'm thinking about how I can prove to you that there's no such thing, indicates the level of insanity that we have accepted as normal. People like me, actually have to think about how to persuade you that there's no such thing as a child who was born in the wrong sex body, and no such thing as a child who needs to be permanently maimed by chemicals or genital mutilating surgery. Everybody knew this 5 or 6 years ago. This is like what the writer Douglas Murray says. The problem with our hysterical woke condition right now is that the things that we're not supposed to say are all perfectly normal, rational, obvious things that we all knew just yesterday until we were told that we needed to forget them. How have we gotten to a place where I have to argue that there's no such thing as a kid born in the wrong body who needs genital mutilating surgery? Does this scare you? It should scare you. It should horrify you. And if it does, you need to be braver and you need to speak up. You can't depend on me or any of the feminists. And feminists are doing yeoman's work on this right now. There are many different kinds of feminists, and anybody can claim that title. But there is a core group of women who have been fighting this on behalf of children. Some of them are mothers, some of them are not. Some of them are lesbians who would have been subjected to this transing routine if it had been available when they were younger. This would have happened to me. I mentioned on an earlier show that there is a young person close to my family who believed that he was born in the wrong body and was treated as if he were a girl from the time he was 6 to the time he was 12. And my mother, the borderline and narcissist, was absolutely taken with this idea and would walk around tearfully saying things like, "Oh, it's so wonderful that she's recognizing she's a girl and that other people are too. I knew from a young age looking at that beautiful child that there was a pretty girl soul inside there." It was put across by my mother as this sort of maternal instinct for this precious, sweet little girl child, but it was really ravenous hunger. She was salivating at the idea of what this child was going to be put through, and I know that because I was raised by my mother, and I know how she treated me when I was a kid. I know how she taunted me for being a sissy. I know how she poked fun of me for having a flabby stomach that no girl would ever want. I know how she obsessed about my effeminate ways by doing things like taking me by the hand on the weekends when we lived in Southern California and walking the alleyways behind our apartment. Because what people used to do was have garage sales or swap meets, as they're sometimes called in California. So there'd be long blocks of apartment complexes, and everybody in the back, it would face an alley, and everybody had a garage, and they'd all open up it was actually really fun. You could find 45 records and antiques and tchotchkes and all this sort of stuff. So I loved being able to walk down those alleyways on the weekends and go to the garage sales. And I remember when I was 7 years old, we went out garage sailing, and my mother was holding my hand, and we walked by an open garage, and on the garage wall was that poster of Farrah Fawcett. You know that poster. Those of you who are old enough to know who Farrah Fawcett is, those of you who are embryos, well, look it up. But it was that famous shot of her in a bikini. I mean, Farrah Fawcett was a beautiful, sexy woman. And a sex symbol in the late 70s through the early and mid 80s. And my mother saw the poster, stopped, looked at me, and said, "What do you think about that, Josh?" And I knew I was supposed to say I liked it, but I wasn't quite sure why. And I said, she's a really pretty lady, Mommy." That's right, just like any red-blooded American boy. This might sound odd or even a little bit cute to you, but it wasn't. It was part of a pattern of my mother obsessing over my effeminate tendencies and trying to get them out of me, or I'm not exactly sure what she was trying to do. Got off on a little bit of a tangent there, but this is very personal to me because I understand this from the inside. I know how such parents are. Transing children is a form of Munchausen's by proxy. People think they know what Munchausen's by proxy is. Well, that's when parents poison their children and make them throw up or make up fake medical conditions and put them in the hospital so the parent can get attention. Well, yes, that is what Munchausen by proxy is. And that's what transing your child is, too. It's parents, and almost exclusively mothers. This is a sin done by mothers. Very few fathers do this. This is a woman's problem. Poisoning their children with puberty blockers, claiming that their child is this extraordinary, rare, and special creature who was born in the wrong body, and taking the child to the children's gender clinics, and there are dozens of children's gender clinics in the United States. Does that alarm you? It should. This is Munchausen syndrome by proxy. These are mothers with borderline and or narcissistic personality disorder, and right now they are public heroes. They are profiled in USA Today. They are shown on Good Morning America. When they show up for a political rally, their children are put up on the stage and to say, oh, it's a 9-year-old trans child. I want a world in which trans kids are valued too. It's disgusting. It's just an elaborate and even sicker form of pageant parents. This is what I'm reacting to when I reacted to James Cantor saying, for some, transition is the right thing, and some want transition for unhealthy reasons. Who are the ones who want it for healthy reasons? Which child was born in the wrong body? Which child has a healthy reason to want a mastectomy at 13? Which child has a healthy reason to say, don't make me go through the trauma of the wrong puberty? The next one says, well, I went on and I said to James Cantor, Dr. James Cantor, saying that, quote, some children are trans and do need mutilation, but some don't, and that's what we need to figure out, is saying that King Solomon slicing the baby in half was the reasonable and moderate position. I am not the extremist for saying that this is monstrous. Because he characterized me as being an extremist. And he said, the research disagrees with that extreme also. The only explanation of the existing evidence is that neither all nor none. Not quite sure what that means. And then he put a hashtag, moderate the new radical. This is what's known as sophistry. This is language games. It's bullshit, and it's gaslighting. And this is how it works. Dr. Cantor has framed this situation in order to position me as being an extremist. And he's done that by rigging the set of options. So he's saying that the range of opinions on this goes from no child should be transitioned, that's my position, to some children should be transitioned, all the way to every child who says they're trans should be transitioned. And then he places himself in the middle so that he looks like the reasonable moderate. Do you see how this works? He's calling me extreme. I didn't even include all of the tweets because I didn't want to bore you with them, but it was more of the same. He also accused me of being emotional, and that I wasn't thinking clearly because I was being emotional. This is also a tactic of narcissistic abuse. And he says he's the moderate because all he wants to do is find out which children need transition, which don't. He follows the science. That's what he says. He just wants to know the scientific explanation. There's no scientific explanation that can justify medically mutilating children. Even if these children do not go all the way through genital altering surgery, which of course is permanent and irreversible, and will often deprive them of the ability to ever experience an orgasm. Yes, I know, you don't want to talk about children and orgasm in the same sentence. I understand it. But we're talking about children who will someday be adults. And we are taking away the ability of these children to mature sexually and to experience sexual joy, as well as taking away their ability to have children, because these treatments usually result in sterility, permanent sterility. What's moderate about saying some children need that? If it's hard to see this, I came up with a couple other examples that have nothing to do with transgenderism and nothing to do with children. So these are little toy models. This is how people who want to pass something off that's wrong as something right, or they want you to spend more money, or they want to manipulate you into something. This is how they do it. So let's pretend we're not talking about medical procedures in children. Let's say there's a furniture store. Put it in the retail context. The furniture store has an interest in making money, right? One of the ways that retailers do this is they give you a range of options for a kind of product because they know that you're going to go for the one in the middle. So let's say that a furniture store puts 3 couches out on the sales floor at 3 different prices. I almost said price points, and then I was going to have to cancel myself. If you say price points, please slap yourself right now and never say that again. It's just gobbledygook nonsense. It's just a price. There's no such thing as a price point. Talk about drilling down and taking deep dives. I hate business speak. So they put 3 couches on the floor, one for $1,000, one for $2,500, and one for $5,000. And why do they do this? Well, they do want to give you choice, and they know that some people can't afford the $5,000 couch and are going to go for something cheaper. But this tripartite arrangement is very common as a sales technique. Most of us, this is a psychological default. We like to think of ourselves as middle-of-the-road reasonable people. We are not extremists. We don't want to think of ourselves as extremists. So when someone sets up an artificial situation with artificial boundaries, we will comply. Like rats in a maze, we will pick that middle path. So they know that even people who might say, gosh, even $1,000 is a lot to spend on a couch, but that's the cheapest of them. I don't want the cheapest one. It's not going to be a good one. I better just go with the $2,500 couch. That's just human psychology. This sort of stuff has been studied in sales and marketing research. And if they want to make more money, they then shift the frame. So they decide that they don't want that $1,000 couch to be the cheap one anymore. The cheapest one is now going to be the $2,500 couch. So you got a $2,500 couch, a $5,000 couch, and an $8,000 couch. And what are most people going to buy now? The $5,000 couch. That is the new moderate, reasonable middle. Do you see that this is a game? And this is the game that Dr. Cantor is playing here, because the range of choices includes every child should be transitioned, and at the other end, no child should be transitioned. So he gets to say, you are an extremist. And when I objected to this, he said, I believe that you think the word extremist means something other than what it does. It simply means that you are adhering to one of the extremes, and your position is at the extreme end, and that this other position is at the extreme end. I'm in the moderate middle. This is sophistry. It's language games. It's lying. It's lying in a slick academic way, but it's lying. Here's another example, and I just made this up. You could think of them on your own. Imagine that a state legislature were trying to tackle drunk driving. They didn't have any drunk driving laws on the books, or the ones they had on the books were not working. So they wanted to tackle drunk driving. But suppose that the legislators on the committee drafting this really weren't that concerned about punishing drunk drivers. They were more concerned with their constituents believing that they cared about this. How might they go about that? They could lay out a range of possible legislative solutions. What might that range look like? I came up with light, medium, and harsh punishments. So we got drunk drivers, and for this model, we're talking about repeat drunk drivers, recidivists, ones who do it over and over again. This is not their first time driving drunk behind the wheel. They've done it more than once. So the range of punishments from light, medium, and harsh. Light punishment. The drunk driver doesn't get his license taken away, the repeat drunk driver, but he gets points on his license. And in the U.S. system, a lot of states have what are called points, and if you rack up a certain number of points and you get points for certain moving violations, then your insurance company will up your rates because you're a bad risk. So the light punishment, the repeat drunk driver gets to keep his license, but he gets points on his license, and we're supposed to believe that because he's going to pay higher insurance premiums that this is a deterrent to drunk driving. But he is not required to put an alcohol ignition lock on his car. One of those things that you have to breathe into, and if you have alcohol in your system, your car won't start. He does not have to do this. Remember, he's a recidivist. He's driven drunk more than once, but he doesn't have to do this. Then we go up to medium punishment. The repeat drunk driver this time gets his license suspended for 3 months, but still does not have to install an ignition lock on his car. No matter how many times he's done this before, his license is suspended for 3 months, but he doesn't have to have that safety feature on there that might protect him from might protect other drivers on the road from him. And we could go all the way to the harsh punishment. The repeat drunk driver loses his license indefinitely, and when he gets it back, if he gets it back, he has to have an alcohol ignition lock on his car for at least 10 years. That's the harsh punishment. Which of those sounds most reasonable to you? I think if you're like me, and I think if you're like most reasonable people, a known repeat drunk driver must get his license revoked and then must be required to pay to put an alcohol ignition lock on his car. That's just sensible. He has proven that he is a danger to other people, not just once, but several times. But because that's the frame, that's an extremist position, right? Because we've got a light punishment, a medium punishment, and a harsh punishment. Maybe we should just go for the medium one, the one that actually allows other motorists on the road to continue to be endangered, because we wouldn't want to be extreme, would we? That's what it would look like if we applied this same logic to another issue of public safety. It's rigged, folks. This game is rigged. You do not need a study to tell you that children should not have their genitals mutilated. You do not need to read a paper in Science or Nature to tell you that no child is actually born in the wrong body. You do not need a PhD psychologist to tell you that this is child abuse. And more, this isn't just child abuse. What I went through at home with my mother was child abuse. It was emotional torture, it was psychological torture, and it was physical torment and beatings. This is worse. This is Mengele level child abuse. Yes, Mengele. This is the kind of shit Nazi doctors did. And I'm the extremist? See you on the other side of the break. Thanks so much for listening. Would you take just a minute right now and share our show on social media? On Disaffected, we take a close look every week at the abuse dynamics exploding in the dark and disordered world that we live in. Tell other people about us. Are you ready for the laughy part? Because we're going to have some fun now. There was a viewer who commented on YouTube. I'm sorry, my friend, I can't remember your name, but you said when you watched the last episode that was the first time you saw me laugh. I've laughed in some other ones, but this is pretty dark subject matter, and as I've said before, a lot of things that are not funny at all are extremely funny, and this is funny. So get your laughs in here. It's weird and disturbing, but it's also extremely funny. Now, this is a visual-heavy segment of the show. Those of you who are listening on audio, I'm going to explain this as best as I can for you. I am very cognizant that a lot of you, or maybe even most of you, are listening and not seeing. And I know how annoying it is when podcast hosts forget that and they forget to narrate what's on the screen. So I'm going to do my best to paint a word picture for you. But this is the kind of thing that if you really want to get the most out of this, it behooves you to go on Rumble and look at this on video, because the visuals are just not going to live up to my description. So this is from an Instagram account called Trans Fighters. And apparently it's a step-by-step guide to protecting yourself as a trans person, but really it's a manual for manipulation. That's all it is. It's like that. It's like that Twilight Zone episode. It's a cookbook. It's so funny. So this is a series of cartoons, illustrations with text on them, and it's you will, if you've ever seen any of these so-called artists in the trans community, well, first of all, they're all shit. I mean, it's just shit art, isn't it? It's cartoonish. It's like badly drawn anime. And anime isn't that well drawn to begin with. Ooh, gonna get some haters now. But it's done in that cartoonish, childlike, broad stroke sort of way. And the font, the typeface they use on it, I don't think it is, but it looks like Comic Sans. It's got that preschool element to it. So this is a visual guide with text on how to defend yourself as a poor trans lady. This is an example. They're laying it out straight here. Okay. This is an explicit step-by-step look into the way that people like this try to manipulate your perception of them. They're very candid about it. So the first one here, the first image, it's a square, and it shows an image of what looks like an angry middle-aged woman glaring at a trans woman. And the trans woman I'm just going to say it. If any of you watching know the so-called artist Sophie LaBelle, a perverse man in his 30s who presents himself to the world as a prepubescent little girl, that's what this art looks like. So the trans woman is a pudgy, tween-looking, big, doe-eyed, exaggerated big eyes, right, like a Disney character, next to this shrewish, small-eyed, sharp-faced cis woman glaring at the trans woman. So, text says, using aggressive body language will open the door for them to use their power to, quote, justifiably punish you. So try victim body language instead. Try new victim body language now with sheeting action. So the way you do this, it is illustrated in the cartoon. You back up and you put your hands up, and it says shy shoulders, hands near your face, elbows in, and step back. So look frightened. Oh. If any of you are John Waters fans, do you remember the movie Female Trouble, where Dawn Davenport launched her career as a glamorous criminal, got acid thrown on her face, and then did a glamour photo shoot about it, and she kept going. It's just completely ridiculous. So hands near your face, shy shoulders, step back, and have your elbows in. If bystanders don't know you're trans. Sure, Jan. If bystanders don't know you're trans, using your voice might get you into more trouble. You might have to use body language alone. Oh, stop it. Everybody knows you're trans. Everybody knows you're a man. Yeah, they'll hear it when you speak in your voice, but they already know. Remember, they don't care about your feelings. The goal of this strategy is to make them want to stop because they worry that other people are judging them. This is an explicit guide to the wounded bird camouflage. Make yourself appear small. Put on feminine, frightened affectations. This is called fawning. They're being like a fawn, a doe. It's just explicit. This is the wounded bird camouflage I talked about. This is a favorite of people with borderline personality disorder. As soon as somebody begins to suss them out or calls their bluff, they immediately become frail, like a damsel in distress, or they fawn and they bat their eyes, or they start crying and looking weak and innocent. It's a put on. Let's go to the next one. So this picture shows some dude standing behind a service desk. It looks like somebody's walking up to I'm sorry I have to say this. This is an Easter egg for one of my very close friends. It's not going to mean anything to the rest of you, but maybe I'll tell you the story later. George, did you hear how I said he was standing at his desk? So this guy is standing at his desk, and a so-called trans woman walks up to him, and I guess he's supposed to be doing something menacing. So the advice is, try bringing outside attention to the thing. Maybe by raising your voice and calling it out. So what you should do is, that's not cool. Please stop. Depending on how you read the room, you might even try something like, actually, I'm a woman and my pronouns are. Wait, I thought they couldn't tell you were trans. Let's go to the next one. Practice with others. Practice makes perfect. So this picture shows two alleged women, and one is she's got an accusatory finger that she's pointing at the chest of the other woman, and the woman that she's pointing at has got her shoulders hunched up, her hands are raised like, whoa, stop, right? And this is really interesting. Notice the artistic style here. The alleged trans woman is actually drawn to look like an actual woman, right? This is fantasy, you guys. This is how they want to see themselves, but it isn't true. So the alleged harassment in this example is apparently the chick on the left doesn't like the color green. So she says, "Your shirt is green. I hate green shirts." And the abusee, does anyone walk up to someone and say, "I don't like blue. I hate blue shirts"? I don't know where this is even coming from. So hands up, and you should say back, "Please stop insulting my shirt." If you can get someone to watch you practice, ask them what worked well with your posture, movements, and voice control. All artifice. All artifice. Oh, this one's really good. This is from chapter 2. I don't know how many chapters there are in this guide. I'm going to have to read the whole thing. So this is titled, People You Just Can't Punch. So the implication here is that in a just world, if you feel harassed as a trans woman, you should simply be able to punch anybody that you want. But there are some people that you can't punch because other people won't like it. So this is what you do with those people. And here are the people that you can't punch. Within this square, there are 4 little circular insets with more of these childish drawings. And there are 4 different groups of people that you just can't punch. First one, cis women gropers. Is that a phrase that has ever been constructed in the English language before? Has anyone ever said that out loud? That might be the first time. As a reminder for those of you who are new to this derangement, cis basically is what they call non-trans people. So if you're not trans, you're cis, which means your gender identity matches up with your sex assigned at birth. And what is your sex assigned at birth? Well, it's just what the doctor or the midwife decided to give you. They just made a guess based on your penis or vagina. They just assigned you a sex. God. So people you can't punch are cis women gropers. There are no women out there who are groping trans women. That doesn't happen. That's a fantasy. This is a fantasy projection. Autogynephilia. This is autogynephilia. The next group of people you can't punch are butthead kids. And it just shows a bunch of disembodied young males with really strange soy boy teeth. And they've all got like speech bubbles with asterisk, pound sign. They're all saying like horrible things, I'm sure. The next group of people that you just can't punch are houseless folks with unfortunate opinions. Houseless folks. And the picture is of obviously a homeless person who's pitched a tent next to his city wall on his street. The language of these people is absolutely amazing, and this is not restricted just to the transgender issue. This is the language of wokeism. So I saw an article last week from one of the woke publications around the city of Seattle, where that it's no longer acceptable to call homeless people homeless. We have to call them the unhoused. Notice the work that's doing, unhoused. It implies that someone else, some power who has money, could have housed these people, but that power failed in their duty to house these people. So they let them down. They're unhoused. Not homeless, unhoused. But these are houseless folks. They also have a fetish with the word folks. It's usually spelled Folx. So these are the people that you just can't punch. And, I'm sorry. I forgot number 4. The fourth group of people that you just can't punch, another trans woman. Why? Why can't you just punch another trans woman? I mean, there is clearly a class of people whom you can just punch. We're not told who they are. We can guess, but why? And the trans woman is so badly drawn. He appears to be wearing some kind of designer sweatsuit and maybe a pearl bracelet, balding head, and the letters ACAB on his shirt, which means all cops are bastards. Oh. Let's go to the next one. All right, so this one's a little more complicated. So this image starts with question. If a cis man gropes you in a crowd and you slap him for it, what happens? Again, this is fantasy projection. Nobody but... I'm not going to say it. Maybe I'll say it in another episode. Nobody but a certain kind of man who is fetishistically interested in trans women gropes them. Okay? This is not something that cis men, that is, men, generally do. These people are living in a fantasy world in which they are the erotic objects and the erotic targets of everyone around them. And it's no surprise that they mix up being the targets of what they claim is harassment and violence, and also in a sexualized way. Because in a perverse way, they're getting off on this. They are fantasizing that they are objects of erotic desire, and it just isn't true. It's just not true. Have you seen any of these people in real life? So if a cis man gropes you in a crowd and you slap him for it, what happens? What goes differently if you slap a cis woman who groped you? Again, first of all, women as a sex class are highly unlikely to be gropers. That is male typical behavior. This is what men do. Sure, every once in a while there's going to be a woman who does so. I have been around the gay and lesbian community all my life since I was 14 years old, and there are all sorts of people, men and women, gay men and lesbians, who break gender or sex role stereotypes all the time. And that's true of some straight people too. But by and large, women aren't gropers. Women are not at risk of being groped by other women, not even lesbians most of the time. This is nonsense, but it's their fantasy. You have to understand, this is a fantasy publication. So what goes differently if you slap a cis woman who groped you? Hint. Crowds will subconsciously side against a trans woman, especially if they call themselves trans allies. I can't really parse that whole thing. There's nothing subconscious about this, okay? To the extent that a crowd will side against a trans woman, and I don't even know if that's true because, frankly, these days they have that halo around their head that I've been talking about. Anybody who calls themselves LGBTQ is seen as a sacred and elevated caste, right? They cannot do wrong. They are always the abused, never the abuser. So I question the idea, honestly, that anyone would consciously or subconsciously side against an alleged trans woman, because I've seen people of apparently normal intellect and mentation watch situations where dudes in dresses and makeup get shirty with other people, get verbally abusive, get violent, or even knock things over in stores. And I see people watching this saying, well, she never would have had to have a fit if people didn't misgender her. Do you remember GameStop Ma'am?
Yes, queen.
GameStop Ma'am. If you're not familiar with this, you should look it up. I can't say it without laughing. There's a U.S. chain of video game stores where you trade in old video games and get credit called GameStop. And a video was circulating within the past year of a guy who was he looked like he was between 6'2" and 6'5", big hulking guy, lantern square jaw. Actually underneath all the slap on his face, a reasonably good looking, masculine looking guy, who was walking around being a trans woman. He had this too tight, like a Paris Hilton style pink designer sweatsuit top, little bell-bottom jeans that hugged his ass. I mean, it was ridiculous. Very Frankenstein-applied makeup and sparkly nail polish. And he's coming in like the truck driver he is and wants to trade in a game. And the clerk says, "I'm sorry, sir, I can't do that." And he goes, "It is ma'am." Oh, sorry. You know, my producer told me before this week's episode, he said, if you're going to start yelling, move away from the microphone. But what do? I move right into it. So he says, "It is ma'am, ma'am." And this whole altercation happens where this poor clerk, right? This guy who looks like he might be 19 or 20 years old. He's a foot shorter than this guy if he's an inch. And he's clearly very scared. And there are onlookers, there are shoppers in the store who are also nervous and are trying to calm this guy down. One of them says, "Sir, you really need to calm down." Every time they said, "Sir," he just goes more. Then he kicks over a display, throws himself around. I mean, you should really watch this if you haven't. This is a man who anybody with an ounce of brains could see was displaying the characteristics of an abusive husband. He probably beats the shit out of his wives. He's also had a career, this guy. He's been arrested on criminal charges before. I don't remember exactly what. But, you know, he's a scofflaw, and he's been tagged by the cops before. And he's had all sorts of... his identity before he became a trans woman, he was a white rapper. Borderline personality disorder. And yet, when I watched people reacting to this on social media... And I do realize that people on social media are self-selecting, but there were a lot of them. The great majority of them were saying things like, "How would you like it if you were misgendered? She has to live with this every day. She can't even get respect in a store." This is crazy. This is craziness. So this image says, you know, that crowds will subconsciously side against a trans woman. I'm not even really sure that's true. And the groping... it's a picture of what looks like a cocktail party. There are tables, people have wine glasses in their hands, and there's what appears to be a suited lesbian standing in the middle. It looks like one of those lesbian nightclub MCs from the 1950s in underground drag bars. There would often be a lesbian who wore a very smart tuxedo, a really handsome looking woman, looking very dapper. That's what this looks like. Apparently it's supposed to be a trans woman. And the groping is this drunk mess of a chick coming up in a party dress, sort of with her arms open, swaying in front of this alleged trans woman saying, "Yes, girl." And that's supposed to be groping. Alternative strategy. You'll need to enforce your physical boundaries without looking like that's what you're doing. Because everybody knows that all these poor little trans women are just wilting, delicate flowers. Two more. Are you having fun? I am. This is for people you can talk back to without repercussions. Do it. And again, we have 4 circular insets with the kinds of people that you can talk back to and how to do it. So the first one says, let him have it. And it's an image of, let's see if I can, the drawing is really bad. It appears to be, this is funny, it appears to be a guy in a wheelchair saying, fuck NVM. I don't know what that means. And on the right is the trans woman, who is one of the only ones actually drawn like the male he obviously is, in a really short mini dress. What you just say to me? So apparently people in wheelchairs are those that you can talk back to without repercussion. I thought that was ableist. Other people that you can talk back to apparently are hoodie-wearing BLM activists with beer and coffee cups. That's the best I can get, best I can do, folks. So what you do with those people, embarrass them in front of their friends is the advice. Here's the speech bubble. Are you even from the Bay? Next one. Tell them you're disappointed in their behavior. And this image, there's a couple of what appear to be kids on the right, although I don't know how their anatomy works. They don't have necks. Tell them you're disappointed in their behavior. And the trans woman on the left, again, is actually drawn in a cartoon way that actually looks like a real woman. I'm sorry. I'm going to just go right and do it because this is exactly what they're thinking of. I'm going to tell your Tia what you just said, okay? I'm going to tell your Tia. They've got to authentic it up with some ethnic, right? So we got to have a Latina in there who talks about, I'm going to tell your Tia what you just said. Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't mean Latina. Latinx has to be a Latinx. You know about that, don't you? The woke people call what we used to call Hispanics and Latinos Latinx because it's a non-gendered and inclusive way without using the masculine O. NPR uses it constantly, and it's outrageous because the most recent surveys of actual Spanish speakers and Latinos found that only 3% of those surveyed had heard of this and approve of it. 97% said they'd either never heard of it or it was ridiculous and they wouldn't use it. But of course, woke white people know best. And finally, when you can talk back without repercussions, cry, scream, say you're contagious, who cares? And it shows somebody with their eyes going in 2 different directions and these scary horror fingers going, rah! Show them your borderline, honey. Show them your borderline. Last one, then we're done, I'm afraid to say. Many harassers are opportunists and are relying on not getting caught. Try calling it out / making a scene. Even if you know you're alone in a building, try calling out to a friend or coworker as if they're in the next room. Call them by name. So we've got a picture here of, this is very strange, apparently a trans woman on the left who's holding an oversized wrench, and a man next to her with a walker, like an old folks walker, and he's got question marks over his head. I think what this is supposed to mean is that this old man in a walker is questioning if this is really a woman in front of him. Well, can you blame him? I mean, honestly, I'm questioning if the people in these drawings are even human, but that's neither here nor there. Apparently, that's threatening. An old man in a walker who can't tell if you're supposed to be a man or a woman. And the advice, the speech bubble is, stop touching me. He's not touching the trans woman. I was going to say he's not touching her. Do you see it even infects me? He's not touching this guy. Stop touching me. Maria, can you come in here? Okay. All right. For women harassers, maybe try loudly male gendering them so that others can hear. Crowds only take notice if they assume that a man is the aggressor. Well, actually, that's true a lot of times. Inside the bubble here is a woman on the left, and she's got those question marks over her head like the guy with the walker. So apparently, her being confused at seeing a walking representation of the uncanny valley in front of her is harassment. And you're supposed to put your hands up and say, dude, get your hands off my boobs. What boobs? I mean, I see those sacks of lentils you got in your bra, but I didn't see any boobs. And again, this person isn't even touching the trans woman. Oh, it is just so ridiculous. Thank you for walking through that with me. I hope you got a little levity out of that. And I'm going to close by telling you just another little story. When I was a waitress, I worked waiting tables from the time I was 16 years old through college and afterwards. It was a really good job to get quick and largely tax-free cash. And I liked working in restaurants. I could hustle, and I was very good at it. And it's just easy to go in. I mean, it's taxing, right? I mean, when you're working with the public and you're dealing with them every day, they can get really unpleasant to deal with. But it's a fast-paced job, and it's a fun job for a young person. And generally, people who work in restaurants get a really tight camaraderie with each other, and you go out drinking afterwards with them. And I have a lot of fond memories of my days waiting tables. But of course, when I first started, my first table waiting job was at Bob's Big Boy restaurant. And that was actually the restaurant I told. No, did I tell you the story? I'll have to save it for another time. Never mind. Well, I worked at a Bob's Big Boy, and I worked at several diners, and then I got a job working the graveyard shift at Perkins Restaurant. And Perkins is a chain of diner-type restaurants. It's basically like Denny's, if you know that restaurant chain. So I worked the overnight shift, which meant that most of our custom was people getting out of the bars, drunks coming in for breakfast, right? Which we all did, when I was young, and we went out to the bars, especially when we snuck into the gay bars with our fake IDs and in drag and all this stuff. We'd go to the, my friend called it Jenny's, the gay Denny's. So I worked the overnight shift, and around 2 o'clock in the morning, the place would fill up when the bowling alley closed. Because in Camillus, New York, that was the only place that you could go and have any fun was at the bowling alley, and the beer was cheap. So it's a very working class crowd. And of course, I was a prissy, sissy 17-year-old and thought I was very much better than everybody else. So I probably had a kind of a snotty attitude. But these people were really funny. So one night, this is where some of my impressions come from. When I do this... That's called grilled cheese face, and grilled cheese face comes from Perkins. So one night, when the bowling alley closed and everybody started coming in, the parking lot filled up with Trans Ams and Firebirds and souped-up Chevy Novas. You all know the crowd I'm talking about. So this dude and his lady get out of this Trans Am and come in the front door. And this was the early 90s, and in central New York, where I lived, everything is at least 10 years culturally behind what you'd find in a big city. So it was still very much 80s and almost 70s-ish attire. Skin-tight jeans on both the men and the women. So you would see the rare male camel toe, these skin-tight Lee jeans these guys would wear. And they'd have the mullet and the parted in the middle feathered hair and the I'm big grown-up Mr. Fireman Steve Mustache, and their ladies would all have teased up permed hair where basically there was a glacier wall in the front that they took Aquanet to, and then they took the other part in a curling iron and turned it down, and then pulled the curling iron out and then sprayed the shit out of that thing. Blue raccoon black eyeliner and blue eyeshadow. So Mr. Man with his lady, he squires her in. He's got his arm around her. He's escorting her to her banquette, right? And they sit down, and she's, he's all, and she's all, and I'm like, oh, Christ. So they sit down in my section, and I go to take their order, and I don't remember what he ordered. The only reason I remember what she ordered is the point of this story. And I said, and what can I get for you? Gracias. Excuse me? Gracias. I'm sorry. Could you say that one more time? Grilled cheese. That's grilled cheese, and that's this week's show. Bye, folks. See you next week. Want to talk back to us? You're in luck. Call our listener line and leave us a message. 202-979-2480. That's 202-979-2480. And remember, we do reserve the right to play messages on the air.